Immunizations are an important way to protect your children from illness. And in fact, thanks to vaccines, some diseases are almost completely eradicated from the United States. So if you got Tots, get shots. Dr. Randall Knott is a pediatrician with UNM Hospitals and joins us this morning. Good morning to you.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. I want to talk about why vaccines are so important.
Well, especially this time of year as parents are getting ready to take their children back to school and start thinking about vaccines, I think it's helpful just to remember what vaccines are and what they reflect. And so if we look back in the last century before we had vaccines and we look at what the years were like in the 1930s, for example, there were, if we look at whooping cough, for example, which is a horrible disease which I've seen many times, affects very young babies severely. In the 1930s, there were 250,000 cases and 7,500 deaths.
Wow.
And so people just don't really know that. And so it's one of the reasons why vaccinating children is so important, because it helps keep that kind of situation from happening.
Absolutely. And nowadays, you know, they're not just for kids, the vaccines, right? I mean, we all need our vaccines.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. I mean, one of the new developments is we have very valuable vaccines available for teenagers into adulthood. And so we have vaccines that are protecting against the same diseases, the diphtheria, tetanus, and whooping cough. So we give that to 11-year-olds on. And then we have a vaccine to prevent a deadly bacteria called meningococcemia that can cause meningitis and bloodstream infections. That if it can kill in a day or two. It's the bacteria we dread the most. And those that survive often lose their arms and legs.
Oh my.
And so, and then we have another exceedingly valuable vaccine that prevents a sexually transmitted infection called HPV, or human papillomavirus, which we are very enthusiastic about.
Well, you know, I'm really curious. As you're talking, I'm thinking about how important and you know, how important it is to save our lives with these vaccines. How does it actually work? How does a vaccine work?
Well, all the vaccines are developed to find a component of the disease that the vaccine can address, and so it's a weakened form of the disease. So with whooping cough, the old version of the vaccine called Hocel was just pretty much a ground-up whooping cough. Whereas now it's what we call acellular pertussis, so it just has components that provide immunity. So it's a much safer vaccine.
Well, I'm glad you said the word safe, because that's where I wanted to go in this next question. You know, we hear so much out there. There's a lot of confusing information and some myths that we need to demystify. So tell us, are vaccines safe, and what are the things that we should concern ourselves with when we make those decisions?
So we feel very confident that vaccines are safe. So there's a lot, as you say, a lot of myths out there that are fostered by very persuasive, charismatic figures.
Spokespeople.
Yeah. And so part of that was fostered by a study that was done by an English physician about 20 years ago that suggested that the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, cause autism. Well, we've known now that that study was very flawed, and that study has been completely rebuked. The authors, except for the lead author, have retracted their statements, and that lead author has lost his license to practice medicine.
Wow.
And so, unfortunately, as a consequence of that, there are areas in the world where measles is actually on the rise. And so, for example, 2 years ago in France, they had 10,000 cases of measles, whereas in our country we have about 200 to 300 cases.
Because of the vaccine.
Because of the vaccine.
So important. And you know, there are a lot of kids, they're heading back to school now, and this is definitely a great time to protect yourself from all the germs that you're going to be surrounded by on a day-to-day basis. So let's tell everybody how they can get more information to contact you.
They're welcome to call where I work in the pediatric clinic at UNM, and our phone number is 272-2345.
Perfect. Dr. Knott, thank you so much for being here. Really helpful information, valuable. We appreciate that.